A new week.
Excited to get moved on to pursue getting better.
This week on The Beat, the Dogs aren't satisfied with second-half dominance over Clemson.
I mean, there were so many things that we got to do better.
We'll take a look at those spots, and Mike gives us the big picture after week 1 of the 2024 season. Here we go.
Giving you the insider takes and the big picture view on the Dogs. This is On the Beat, presented by Ingles, with DawgNation insider Mike Griffith and Cody Chaffins.
It's Monday night, and welcome to On the Beat. I am Cody Chaffins, along with the man you're all here to hear from. It is DawgNation insider Mike Griffith. Got a huge show going on today. We'll have a little news from Kirby Smart's press conference. Mike's got some stuff to talk about from the Clemson game. I'll play a little I Spy, and then it was a crazy offensive explosion around the SEC. We'll get to all of that coming up, but let's start with the news. Kirby Smart holding his press conference in Athens on Monday afternoon. You were on the beat in the room, Mike, and he gave us a little update on some injuries. The one I'm most interested to hear about, Mykel Williams, who had to leave that Clemson game after getting chop blocked.
Yeah, Cody, Phil Muffa hit him with a low ankle block, a chop. It was an illegal block. You kind of wonder why a 230-pound guy's got a chop, but let's face it, that was a chippy physical game. Mykel suffered a grade 2 sprain, of the ankle, questionable for Tennessee Tech. I mean, there's no reason to roll a guy like that out there in a game you're going to win by 50 points or whatever Kirby decides to win by. So I'd say you probably won't see him against Tennessee Tech and, Kentucky. Hard to say right now. You don't know the degree of that sprain. Warren Brinson, also with an ankle, didn't sound as serious, but again, another big that you really don't need to roll out there against Tech. And you want to give these younger players an opportunity to get some reps. I mean, you need Jamal Jarrett and Christian Miller to continue to get work because that defensive tackle rotation usually goes 5 deep. Don't know the status of Xavier McLeod. I don't believe he played in the game. He had an abdominal strain that forced him to miss some time in fall camp. Got to think he'll be back sooner than later, but we don't know when. We do know Jordan Hall is out indefinitely with a broken tibia, so they're a little thin at that position. To me, that was the one area I thought Georgia could have been a little better at. But yet still, there's still option. I mean, Ty Ingram's Dawkins can slide inside, and he did. Then when Sam Pemba comes in and plays the end spot, Mykel, when he's healthy, is also taking snaps at defensive tackle. Georgia, so many weapons, so many different ways they can hit you, and you saw how they expertly applied those different weapons in the second half. Really, 4 quarters against Clemson defensively.
Yeah, Joseph Jonah-Ajonye got some run as a freshman in there. A lot of freshmen we saw running in there on Saturday against Clemson. Now, going to Kirby's press conference, one of the questions I heard you ask, you wanted to know from Kirby, tell me about this green dot helmet communications. We knew that would be moving. It'd been in the NFL. We knew college would be taking over that. And it was interesting to hear him kind of talk about it. I talked to C.J. Allen after the game. And at least on defense, offense, it's just Carson Beck and Mike Bobo having a conversation. But on defense, they can't have 2 guys with a green dot in there at the same time. So there's a little bit of shuffling that has to go on. They have multiple helmets for some of those guys, so they don't have 2 guys with green dots at the same time. But really interesting to hear you ask him about that. And he didn't open up too much about it.
Well, I mean, Kirby's the master at this. Kirby was on the NCAA rules committee when all this was being discussed. So he's had his wheels spinning a long time on how this would play out and how to use it offensively and how to use it defensively. Like you said, on offense, it's no surprise that Carson would have access to that microphone in his helmet with Coach Bobo talking to him from the skybox and being able to really give him an idea what he's seeing from a bird's eye view. And that helps Carson process things even quicker. I mean, this is really to Georgia's advantage, Cody. I mean, these green dot helmets, Georgia is so complex with what they do, and their players are so skilled and have such high football IQs. This technology is really a big advantage. So start with defense. Kirby kind of hinted around that maybe it would go to a player with less experience. And I was thinking Jonah Aguero because he was supposed to make his first start at the Star. Of course, he was a late scratch. He'd had a hamstring that had limited him in practice. Maybe could have gone in an emergency, which tells you that he'll probably be back for the next game. But instead, Kirby said he did keep it with the linebackers. C.J. Allen wore it some, Raylan Wilson wore it, Smile Munden. Kirby didn't say much about it, which tells me there's probably a lot to it. There's probably a lot going on there. And he's not going to tell people how they're utilizing it on defense. Why would he? What do they say? The magician never reveals the trick. So there were different times when different players on defense had it. As you said, only one player at a time. And for those people that haven't followed it, like you said, this has been going on in the NFL since 1994, but it's new to college football. And the coach from the box can talk to one player on the field via radio communication up until there's 15 seconds left on the play clock, at which point the electronic communication shuts off. Well, some teams are trying to go no huddle to kind of limit what the defense can do as far as their movement and as far as the intel they can get from the box. But I thought Georgia managed it well. I thought it was a factor. We know it was a factor on offense. Carson told us that he used the iPad technology. This is another change. You can have iPads now on the sideline and in the locker room at halftime, and that enables Carson, just like NFL quarterbacks, to get those snapshots to see what the defense is doing. And that's what set up London Humphrey's big 23-yard third down conversion, was that Bobo and Carson had noticed Clemson going to a certain defense in third and long. So they had a play prepared for that defense when that situation came up again. And London cut in instead of going out, kind of caught Clemson sleeping a little bit. They'd scouted out a tendency via the iPad, so they had a play ready. And really, that was the brilliance of this scheme for Mike Bobo. I don't think people really understand what a chess match this is. When you show a team a look and you build a tendency, they have an anticipation. They've done their job. They've scouted you. They know what this personnel means. They know what this formation means in this down and distance. Well, you self-scout and you say, well, this is what we typically do, but we're going to change them up. We're going to show them this look. We're going to show them this personnel. They're going to anticipate that out route. We're going to have the guy go in, and we're going to get a leg up by breaking tendency. So there is a lot of chess going on. Listen, Clemson is a very good football team. Do not be fooled by this final score, folks. If you watch the first half, you know how good Clemson was. If you watch the first quarter, as I look at these statistics, Clemson 47 yards, Georgia 29 through the air. You would have thought Clemson had the better pass attack when you take a look. They actually had more yardage than Georgia. And at halftime, it's a 6-0 game. The difference was in the halftime adjustments and something else we're going to talk about, some of the players that were able to emerge from Georgia.
So you're telling me, Mike, you feel like that, the first half struggles, was it all, just Bobo setting them up for the second half, or do you think there was some legit to the slow start that Georgia had? Because I've got some thoughts about it too, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, first of all, the first thing that Kirby Smart is going to do with his offense is not let them beat themselves. So you're not going to see a lot of chances taken without the setup. You always hear Kirby talk about get the run game going, get the run game going. When you're able to run the ball effectively, which Georgia does, to the point that Clemson was playing what you call man-free, where there's only one safety back there, not two, right? Because they're loading up to stop the run. They know that Georgia wants to establish the run and be physical. So it's kind of strength on strength early on. Well, once you're able to break a few of those runs and get those secondary guys biting, playing a little closer to the line, anticipating the run, that's when the play action becomes very effective. So it is a chess match, and as long as the game's close, Georgia can do what Georgia's going to do. Remember, they were winning the field position battle throughout the entire first half. They had Clemson pinned down. Georgia wasn't able to capitalize on a couple drives early. I know that was frustrating, but Georgia also was not going to turn the ball over and take unnecessary chances to put themselves in deep down and distance. So early on, there's a little bit of sparring going on out there, right? A lot of jabs being thrown. It's really not until the second half when you've got that team set up for the knockout, as we talked about Carson and Bobo, knowing that play to London Humphreys was going to work before they called it, right? So there is a lot to the football game that people don't recognize. It's not as simple as, Mike Bobo is just a slow starter. No, Mike Bobo's playing chess, and you better believe it. If Clemson had scored on their first two drives, Georgia's game plan would have changed rapidly. But as it was, Georgia was winning the field position battle. They were up on the scoreboard, and they still had the benefit of those halftime adjustments that they knew would be there.
I think one of the things, as I stood on the field and you kind of watched it unfold, and I don't have the benefit of some replays and seeing some things from different angles, and I'll talk more about that later on in the show, but it felt like, is this like last year? Where last year I did feel like when Georgia was going through the scripted plays at the beginning of the game, they weren't as good as when they finally got off that script, those first 10 plays or whatever, and kind of had some slow starts. I don't think that was the case, like you said, on Saturday. I think the big factor was no Trevor Etienne, and so they weren't real comfortable. They were throwing some of those short passes because that's the run game for them when they're not real confident. And I feel like they had to have known that Nate Frazier was going to be better than Branson Robinson. They just couldn't start Nate Frazier the way they maybe wanted to because he was a freshman. And Kirby has some of that kind of stuff where he's like, this guy's paid his dues. He's going to play first. And, we didn't see Frazier until the very first play of the second quarter. I think that was the spark, too, that definitely was needed for Georgia. Branson Robinson just didn't have that same kind of spark that Nate Frazier had.
Yeah, there's no doubt. And another reason why you see those scripted plays is because Georgia wants to see how Clemson's going to defend it. They want to see what's out there. That way, they have an idea when they go with this personnel and this formation, they know what they're up against. This is going to help them be better prepared and have a better idea where the matchups will be the next time around. So, again, those scripted plays are there for a reason. Georgia's going to school. They're seeing what Clemson's personnel is. They're seeing how Clemson's defending things. And then they can adjust because they have so many different weapons. I believe 9 different players caught passes in this game. And it's not like they go in saying, we're going to get the ball to this guy, and this guy. They go in saying, what's the defense giving us? What is the matchup that we feel is most favorable? So this is a very fluid offense. It's very chameleon-like. There's a lot to be said when you have this sort of flexibility. You have to have great talent in all your positions to play this style, and you have to have confidence in all your players that they're going to be assignment sound and execute. And that's exactly what Georgia did. And that's why the second half was so different than the first half, Cody.
And it was Kirby Smart made it a point to say, we like to involve a lot of different guys throughout this offense. It's not just going to be, hey, Colby Young's going to be the star today. I don't think we've seen that, really once in the Kirby Smart era. I can't think of a play where it was just one guy took over, maybe Brock, obviously, late in that Auburn game. But they're going to spread the touches around. And like you said, there's a lot of different guys who are very capable of handling those plays. London Humphreys comes to mind. Cash Jones did his thing a little bit as well. So there's a lot of options for Georgia, and they like to spread it around. They're not going to build it all around one guy.
Yeah, the only time you really saw that was when you had George Pickens and JT Daniels, and they had a very special chemistry. And, JT told me a funny story. He said, I had a deal with George. Some of those balls that I threw to him were maybe it looked like 50-50 from the stands, but they're really more like 80-20 when it's George Pickens. And I told George, listen, George, I'll give you a chance on those balls, but you can't let me get intercepted, man. And sure enough, Pickens would go up, and even when he wasn't in position to make the catch, he would play defense. So JT would force some balls to George because of his incredible talents. And then in the Peach Bowl, JT said he let one, and I don't know how many people will remember this play against Cincinnati, but he had to let a ball go early because there was pressure, and he threw it right to a defender. He said, doggone if Pickens didn't strip the ball from that guy. And he came back to the huddle. He said, hey, JT, we still got our deal, right, man? And sure enough, JT kept feeding him. So that was really the one exception. When you got an exceptional talent like that, that's a little bit different. Obviously, George Pickens was very special at Georgia when he was healthy, and JT was a guy who was very adept at reading defenses as well. And if we're being honest about it, at that time, there really wasn't a lot of really other great options. That may have been the low point in the receiving core. Brock Bowers was still just a freshman. Ladd was still getting his feet wet, if you remember that. So those are, that's the exception to the rule. For the most part, they feel good about everyone. And the other thing about Georgia, as Trayvon Walker showed, you don't have to have gaudy statistics. NFL players know that if you play at Georgia, you're practicing against the best every single day. You're lined up against another NFL player. So maybe you don't have 80 or 90 catches like that guy at UNLV, but 36 catches at Georgia in the SEC, in this style of offense, practicing against elite defensive backs, first and second rounders, you're going to get developed. So players don't necessarily have to have that same attitude that feed me the ball. I gotta make these highlights to make my money. No, at Georgia, all you've got to do is your job. And if you're good enough to be the guy out there at Georgia doing your job, you're good enough to play in the NFL.
Really was said, Mike. All right, we're going to take our first break on the beat. When we come back, we'll play a little I Spy and also get Mike's view on the SEC. You are listening to On the Beat here on DawgNation.
So, you going to play this week?
You gonna play this week?
You going to play this week?
You gonna play this week?
You going to play this
You
week?
gonna play this week?
You gonna play this week?
You going to play this week?
You gonna play this week?
This week?
And welcome to the Ingles Game of the Week as the Warhorses square off against the rival.
He's going in.
He's going in. Go, baby!
Ingles. We're with you every step of the way.
So happy to have Ingles on board. Cody Chaffins and Mike Griffith back here on the Beat. And I've had the special privilege over my career, almost 20 years now, of watching most Georgia games from the sideline. That was the case on Saturday in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I was filming for DawgNation. And because of that, I get a kind of an interesting viewpoint. I don't always get the best replays. I don't get to see what they're talking about on the TV broadcast, but I get to catch some things that other people don't get to see. And so I decided let's put all that together each week in a segment we call Boots on the Ground. All right, so the first thing that I kind of spied in this week's game was right after London Humphrey's touchdown in the second half. And what I noticed was kind of something funny. As we take a look at the video, you can see that Humphreys is celebrating with all of his teammates. But when you see Kirby Smart, he doesn't go to Humphreys to say, great job. Who is he talking to? Cash Jones. And I said, why is he so happy with Cash Jones at this play? And it goes back to something we talked about on the beat last week. We said, all right, it's going to be a Barrett Carter, an NFL linebacker, blitzing. Can somebody pick up that blitz to give Carson Beck the extra second to make the pass? And on that play that London Humphrey scores a touchdown, guess who was blitzing and guess who picked up the blitzer? We wondered, is Cash Jones big enough? Mike, he was big enough and strong enough, and it led to a touchdown.
Well, he played good when he had the opportunity, Cody, and this is what really sets Georgia apart. We know when the 5-stars come in, like a Jalen Carter or a Nate Frazier or a KJ Bolden, we know they can make an immediate impact. They're talented. They're at the best of their class. But what makes Georgia special is when you can take a guy like Cash Jones, a walk-on, or even a guy like Ladd McConkey, who was very underdeveloped when he first came in, or Eric Stokes. These are guys that were 3-star guys that were very fortunate just to get scholarships. But when they can grow and develop within the program, that's coaching and that's development. But you've got to be able to recognize these guys. They have to have the right attitude and stick-to-itness, like a guy like Cash Jones, who's just going to come in and do his job and be ready. There was no guarantees for Cash Jones coming into this year. If Trevor Etienne would have been healthy, if Rod Robinson would have been healthy, maybe he only would have gotten 2 or 3 snaps at the end of the game. With those players out, though, his number was called and number 32 was ready, not just to catch the ball, not just to run it, but as you said, to step up with that 185-pound frame and block that future first-round 230-pound linebacker. That's Georgia football. That's the winning edge for Kirby, is that he can develop in addition to getting that 5-star talent.
And I love that he was watching that play live. That's what stuck out to him. Not London Humphreys, who by the way, lowered his shoulder and got in the end zone, which was very impressive. But Kirby wanted to find him and say, that's the moment. That's the stuff that makes the plays. That's why he's always on the wide receivers about blocking as well. All right, second thing on our Boots on the Ground segment, one thing I noticed. So I got to mill about on the field after the game, and the thing special about the Aflac kickoff game is they want to give out this trophy after the game, right? So I'm out there with all the players, and it kind of took a minute for everything. They had to get a stage set up. They had to get Gary Stoken out there. And one of the things I noticed as I was kind of with all the players is that there was one guy, Oscar Delp, who was not about it. He did not want any part of all of this ceremony. Some guys, Trevor Etienne, having some fun there. But I'm telling you, I don't have video of Oscar Delp, but I could hear him, and I probably couldn't play the audio because he said it's one of expletive. This is the first game. We got 16 more. We need to get back to the locker room and get to work. He didn't want to be celebrating a win like this. Some of the guys did play along, but Oscar Delp, to me, was kind of the feeling of this Georgia. What are we doing celebrating an opening win? It meant nothing to him. He's on to the next, just like Kirby is.
No doubt. That was one of the first things Kirby said. I mean, Cody, Georgia has now won 40 straight regular season games. You got to go back to 1936 Oklahoma to find the only other Power 5 team that won more. It was 45. 5 more, and Georgia matches that record. That's amazing. Another incredible statistic. Kirby has won 21 straight games when he's had more than a week to prepare for an opponent. That goes all the way back to that Texas Sugar Bowl loss, and we know the Dogs' heart wasn't in that. They should have been in the playoffs and got left out. But that tells you everything about preparation and mindset. And to Kirby's point, and Kirby was telling us about the tough game Tennessee Tech played last week. He was already trying to sell us on that game. At the same time, he knows a lot of young players are going to need development so that they can step out. I thought a real key to this game and a real breakthrough for Georgia, with this transfer portal, you lose a lot of the quality backups, a lot of those juniors and third-year sophomores that should be next man up. And you have to count on transfers, and you have to count on freshmen. And when we looked at this team, there were some areas where there weren't proven players, and suddenly there were injuries. There were injuries at D tackle. There was injuries in the backfield. Well, we already talked about Cash Jones. Here comes Nate Frazier, incoming freshman, didn't go through spring, didn't even play in the G-Day game. And yet Georgia had to rely on him in the second half. He's ready to go. You mentioned London Humphreys. Let's be honest. We all wondered about a transfer from Vanderbilt. We knew he'd help the team GPA, but could he really help the team on the field? Well, guess what? When Dylan Bell started to cramp up, there was London Humphreys cashing in, the leading receiver in yardage, and also caught a touchdown pass. That was not counted on. How about KJ Bolden? We all looked at KJ, and Buford football is great, but it's not the SEC. And KJ, a little undersized. He got trucked in the spring, but there he was, first play on the field, taking on that Clemson 230-pound running back. That was a grown man KJ laid out. He was ready to ball. Impact players that stepped up. We didn't know how they would do. We always count on Kirby to have him ready. And he did. And that was a difference in the game to have these new. Colby Young, the kid barely transferred. The transfer from Miami had a hamstring, very few reps. But what he did rep, that touchdown route that Carson threw him, beautiful throw, 6'4" frame. Georgia's newcomers made the difference in this game, Cody.
Yeah, and I want to show you one more thing kind of building on that. You said Nate Frazier didn't get here to the summer. He is already a leader on this team. It speaks to Kirby's recruiting and how they picked the right guys. Because the final thing, after Nate scored that touchdown, I saw him come over to the offensive line, and he's telling everybody, dapping him up. They're not having to come to him, the freshman, and he doesn't have to be quiet and sit on the sideline. No, he's a part of this. He wanted to be a part of it. Go up to every guy and talk to them and shake their hands. That tells you the kind of person that he is right there, and that's the kind of people that Kirby Smart wants on his team, leaders even just months into his Georgia career.
Well, it also tells you about tomorrow. Right? I mean, we know what this team has. We know the senior leaders. We know the junior leaders. We know the projected first-round picks. But we're talking about London Humphreys being a sophomore. We're talking about Nate Frazier being a freshman. We're talking about Lawson Lucky. And boy, did he look good at the tight end position on Saturday. He's only going to get better. We're seeing that youth emerge. We're seeing tomorrow's stars and tomorrow's leaders lead today and star today. So if you were worried about the future, and you might worry in there a little bit about quarterback moving forward, but got a feeling Georgia could probably land a pretty good one. But there's other players at other positions. So now a quarterback looks at Georgia and goes, wow, check this out. They got this Nate Frazier guy. They got this London Humphreys guy. They got this Lawson Lucky guy. And you better believe that there's more offensive linemen that are coming down the pipe.
All right, so if we're going to do boots on the ground and get my ground level view, one of the things I learned about Mike Griffith that I'm so impressed with is he knows how to get things done up high. He used to jump out of airplanes as a member of the U.S. Army, which I absolutely love. So that gives us to our next thing. That's Mike's 30,000-foot view.
Might have to change that to 2,500 feet. That was the highest jump I ever made, was 2,500 feet out of a helicopter.
So
30,000 sounds good, but let's get it technically right. 2,500.
Okay. So you weren't jumping that high, but you really do have a bird's eye perspective, and plus you've been all over this league, covered all these teams. So let's get to the Southeastern Conference, and some of these numbers, you go through the scores on Saturday. A lot of big numbers being put out there. You look at some of them. Alabama 63-0 over Western Carolina. Missouri 51-0. Oklahoma 51-3. Texas 52-0. Tennessee 69-3. Auburn 73-3. Even Mississippi State scored 56. Ole Miss 76-0 over Furman. What stood out to you? What's the big picture view of what this conference is?
Well, number one, we wondered about NIL, and it is a little bit of an equalizer at the top for those elite programs that can afford to go out there and cherry pick players and pay players to come. But I think the gap has grown even wider now between the powerful FBS and some of the once proud FCS teams, and maybe even the lower FBS teams like the Temples, like the Western Kentuckys. Look, I knew that Alabama would score a lot of points. Kalen DeBoer, he had to empty the clip. He had to show the Alabama fans and show his team, we're fine. We don't need Nick Saban. This is the new Alabama. We're going to do things differently. We're going to run up the score on Western Kentucky and show everybody how great we are. I hope he didn't use too many plays, because they're going to be playing Georgia. You better believe Georgia's already got the film of that game and got some people working on it. But it was impressive, and it does tell you that the SEC is top heavy. Texas is legit. Ole Miss is legit. Alabama is every bit as dangerous as they've ever been. Don't forget about Tennessee and Missouri. You mentioned their scores, both impressive. The SEC is loaded. I almost look at the college football playoff and say, I'll tell you what, how about if we just pick the top 6 SEC teams and then the next 6 teams from wherever? because there's 6 SEC teams that I guarantee you are among the top 12 in the country. The question, Cody, is what happens as the season progresses? Can they keep their quarterbacks healthy? How is the team chemistry in the locker room? How are the NIL deals, man? Is there some jealousy in those locker rooms? What is the team character like? One of the most important things that happened in that game Saturday was Clemson hit a deep ball. And Kirby said that was going to happen, and he wanted to see how his team would respond. Obviously, they responded well. Not every team can respond like that. There will be more adversity for Georgia and every other team in the country. It's not if, it's when, but it's about how do you respond and do you continue to get better? The complacency thing. You mentioned Oscar Delp walking off the field, wanted no part of the celebration. Kirby Smart, first words, win the next one. You have to have the right mindset. Some programs are built better to handle success than others. That is another separator for Georgia football. Kirby is never complacent. The job is never done, and it can always be done better. And that's why he sounded almost glum today when we got a lot of things. You would have thought he lost 34. No, they won 34-3, and we got a lot of things to work on. Well, they always have a lot of things to work on. That's just the Georgia way.
Mike, I was looking online, and good news. Apparently, the Georgia-Alabama game's already been played, according to some folks out there. They say, this game, Georgia struggled with a really bad Clemson team, they say. And then look what Jalen Milroe did under Kalen DeBoer. He's 7-9, 200 yards, 3 passing touchdowns, 2 rushing touchdowns. This game's over, they say. I think we're finally in September. The team won't, but we can look ahead. You start to see Georgia and Alabama, this matchup at the end of the month. You got any early thoughts?
Well, we'll find out more about Alabama this week when they play Wisconsin up north. And I'm not saying that Wisconsin's going to beat them because they won't, but they'll have bigger, more physical guys. We know about Luke Fickell. We remember the Peach Bowl. We remember that undefeated Cincinnati team and how they took Georgia. Now, granted, there was a couple guys with COVID and some people declared early, but they took Georgia to the hill. Luke Fickell is not a joke, folks. If you Google this guy, he was a championship wrestler. He is a tough dude. This is year 2 for him at Wisconsin. That grass will probably be grown about a foot high to give him every advantage they can over the Tide. Let's see how Milroe does when he gets hit. He will get hit against Wisconsin. Same with a lot of these teams. Georgia is already ahead. Listen, Clemson is not a bad football team. I'd bet you dollars to donuts that team's going to win 10 games, and I really wouldn't be surprised if they made the college football playoff. Everybody's gotten amnesia about that first. It was 6-0, folks. That game was a nail-biter. We were wondering. Clemson is a good team. Georgia made great adjustments, and Georgia is special. Don't discount the value of playing a team like that. The line of scrimmage was even. Clemson's got some dudes, and they got some linebackers and some running. Georgia has already passed the test. Now they get to, I don't want to say rest, but they can selectively rest some guys to get a little healthier, get over those bumps and bruises, play some more young people, because they've got to marshal their forces all over again. Kentucky in the Bluegrass State is not going to be a cakewalk under the lights in Lexington. That is going to be a rock'em sock'em game for the Georgia Bulldogs. So Georgia catches a break. The Tide has to go up north. I'm not sure. I don't think Ole Miss plays anybody until Georgia. It seems like they had one of the easier schedules. Missouri likewise. Tennessee might have a bit of a test with NC State. I'm not going to get too carried away with those scores, but we do know they have explosive offenses, and we know they have capable quarterbacks in other programs.
A lot of tape to watch. We're going to do our Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing hot and cold segment in just a minute. I will do an early hot, and it was, you talked about Kentucky, 31-0. They only played until 9 minutes in the third quarter, and they had a lightning delay. But our man, Brock Vandagriff, 3 touchdowns in just 2.5 quarters. And, oh, by the way, Jamon Dumas-Johnson also had an interception in their game over Southern Miss. So something to think about, too. We're not going to look too far ahead because we got to get past a road game at Kentucky coming up in just a couple of weeks. But like we said, Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing, that hot and cold segment's coming up right after the break.
Want to make sure your family stays comfortable all year long? Our family of trained comfort specialists are available anytime to service or repair your system. Or it may be time to replace your old units with a new trained HVAC system.
We are a locally owned family business, and we carefully select the technicians who we send into your home.
At Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing, we are large enough to handle all of your HVAC and plumbing needs,
but small enough to care.
Call today to take advantage of our 3-visit annual maintenance plan.
All right, we're back on the Beat. It's time for our Anytime Heating, Cooling, and Plumbing. Who's hot and who's not, Mike? Well, tell me, who is hot this week?
Mike Bobo and Carson Beck. And again, I know a lot of fans are going to point to the 6-0 halftime, but you've got to give this man credit. The halftime adjustments were magical. And when you're able to adjust, when him and Carson are on the same page, that's going to give those guys confidence. They have confidence in one another. That relationship, that chemistry, it means everything. And I believe that Georgia is going to be able to build on this. Again, that was a very good, I can't stress this enough, Cody. That was a very, very good Clemson defense. Okay, that is a championship level defense on the other side of the ball. And Georgia put 4 touchdowns on them in the second half. So Bobo and Carson, the way they ended that game, everything clicking, all the adjustments, seeing the same things. They can trust one another. There's no second guessing. That is the most important relationship on the team is Mike Bobo and Carson Beck. They leave Atlanta with tremendous momentum. KJ Bolden, I can't say enough about the performance of this freshman at safety and what this opens up for Georgia. You see, Clemson saw Jonell Aguero just like we did on the depth chart. They said, oh, look at this. There's going to be a first-time guy starting at the star. Let's design some plays to go at him. Surprise, Malachi Starks, All-American, has been moved over to that position. All those plays you drew up, they're not going to work against Malachi Starks. KJ Bolden was able to go in at safety and hold his own. And I don't know that we're going to see that package again. There's other guys that have practiced there. There's been a lot of work that's been put in to get some other guys ready if Jonell's ready. But you know that option is there now. This secondary that had all these questions got some answers. We got to see KJ Bolden step up, this dynamic, explosive, instinctive true freshman. Remember when Kirby told us he was ahead of where Malachi Starks was when he was a freshman? And we went, sure, Kirby, right? Right, Jan. Well, guess what? Number 4 was ready, and he showed us from the first play. I can't tell you how excited those coaches have to be to know what they have in KJ Bolden. What a ball hawk. Yes, they lost Javon Bullard, and that hurts, a former championship game MVP. But KJ Bolden is special, and he's going to make plays all year long. There couldn't have been a better start for KJ. Lots of confidence to build in. You better believe he's going to be in the film room waiting for his next opportunity.
Loved how physical he was, too, coming up and getting after Phil Maffa a little bit. All right, those guys are hot. Tell me who's cold after the Clemson game. I think Georgia fans, some would have told you, oh, it's that slow start. That's the cold thing. But you're saying that's not the cold thing. Give me what is cold.
What's cold is the defensive line. We got the injuries that we're talking about. Mykel Williams with the ankle. And even if he gets better, Cody, and I hate to bring this up, I brought it up with Jalen Carter, and I was dead wrong. When you've got a guy on the verge of making generational money with a family counting on him, and when he's down on the field, you better believe that family's holding their breath. That's their fortune that's on the line. What is Mykel like when he comes back psychologically? Can he respond like Jalen Carter did? Because Jalen Carter came back like a fierce tiger. I remember asking Kirby, are you worried about Jalen Carter? Because he's kind of already proven himself and he doesn't. And Kirby said, what are you talking about? Now he can really prove himself. Now he can show these NFL teams what he's all about and raise his draft stock even more. And as it turned out, he needed to in light of what would follow. Point is, we have to see how Mykel comes back mentally as well as physically. Now, on the physical side, Brinson and Stackhouse, it's not going to be Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt. There's drop-off. They have improved, but how much? Hard to say because Clemson has a very, very good offensive line. But I saw them get gouged a bit. Now, you can point to the final rushing stats and say, well, Mike, they only rushed for X amount of yards. But remember, Clemson was playing for more than 2 scores behind. Their game plan changed dramatically. I would say, had the game stayed even, there's a good chance Clemson would have gone over 100 yards. No shame in that. But this defensive line, particularly the interior defensive tackles, with Brinson having the ankle, Stackhouse went out for a while with a lower leg injury. We know the number 3 man, Jordan Hall, is out indefinitely with a broken tibia. We need to see Kristen Miller and Jamal Jarrett step up in a big way because that is going to be the key to Georgia winning the national championship. Is that interior defensive line. We know they got the juice in the backfield. We know what Carson's capable of, and we saw some receivers emerge. We've seen the secondary grow up right before our eyes. We know the linebackers didn't have a bust. They were outstanding at the second level. But what about the defensive line? That's still the biggest question moving forward. I didn't think they had their best game. They were good enough. I didn't think they had the best game. I'm going to put them in the cold category this week.
Yeah, a lot of questions that you had going into the first game. That's one of them that is still unanswered, even after playing a good opponent in Clemson. We'll see how the defensive line stacks up. We'll get the latest on those injuries. Mike, you and Connor Riley do such a great job on DawgNation.com. We'll hear from Kirby on Tuesday. We'll hear from Kirby on Wednesday. So the latest we have on that will be in all of those stories on DawgNation.com. Be sure to check out all of Mike's articles on there. And we'll be back next Monday for another On the Beat podcast for you. And we'll be wrapping up Georgia and Tennessee Tech. That's going to do it for this week. We'll see you next time.